Thank you, Pierre, for organizing this and giving us a chance to share some thoughts. And we miss being in Germany in person with you, but look forward to being there later in the year, and look forward to seeing you here soon. So I'm going to start by saying, you're seeing the topic du jour, and I'm not going to be all that different, but I do want to make a comment. And you see my older brother Chris is a more traditional guy. You see him wearing a tie. He's more conservative, but I've adopted the now San Diego mandatory compliment, which is the bandana, because we are supposed to be covering our faces. In fact, when I go out of the office, I put this thing on, and you see Chris carries a mask, as every physician should. Anyway, I'm going to walk. I probably should be sharing my slides, shouldn't I? My screen. So let me do that. And can you all see it?
Perfect, Albert. Yes, we can now.
Fantastic. So, well, I'm going to give you a little bit of context. I'll talk a little bit about our digital strategy. I'm going to obviously talk about the topic du jour, which is COVID. And as I like to tell my team, never waste a crisis. And then share some thoughts about the new normal, or what I'm calling that was then, this is now. So as those of you who've been here know, Rady Children's is the pediatric provider of choice, as well as the safety net for kids in 3 county regions: San Diego, Southern Riverside to the north of us, and Imperial County to the east of us. And you can see in the slides the statistics from last year around our size, our volume, etc. I'm not going to dwell on this. You can read this when you get the slides. But what I want to spend a little bit of time on, and maybe ask you to ponder, what was your digital strategy this last December, right? What did it look like? And we're going to play bingo here for a second. And I'm going to pop up a chart. And really quick, you tell me how many of those squares you hit. Was EHR in your digital strategy? How about HIE? How about artificial intelligence? How about personal health records? CRM? Internet of Things? Patient-generated content? Robotic process automation? Chatbots? Robots? Telemedicine? Patient portal? Online scheduling? 3D printing? Personalized medicine? Predictive analytics? Anybody call bingo? I'll tell you what our digital strategy called for. On the top tier, we had our optimized, right? Things that were in place, but as others are never stopped. We always keep trying to make better. So those things on the top tier: EHR, patient portal, online scheduling, health information exchange, personalized medicine, genomics, etc., were things that were in our optimize bucket. Then the next thing was our scale, things that we had pilots on, small inlays into things, but that we needed to take to prime time. Telemedicine being one of them, mobile health, 3D printing, patient-generated content, and sensors. And then things that we wanted to explore, we didn't really have this stuff out there: chatbots, AI beyond personalized medicine, Internet of Things, robotic process automation, CRM, predictive analytics. So that's how we had organized our thinking around digital health. And as I think about this, I wondered who drove our digital health strategy. And I want to ask that question of you, and maybe you should ask it of yourselves, right? Who drove that strategy? Was it your board? Was it your CEO? Was it your CIO? Was it somebody else? And in driving that, did you face any barriers? And were those barriers financial? And Larry talked about, for instance, the telemedicine barriers of a financial nature because of the reimbursement arrangements from the centers of Medicaid and Medicare in the US. Were they technological? Were they cultural? Were your patient population and your provider population prepared to embrace that digital technology? Were there regulatory? Was it all of the above? Right. So I'm going to focus on telemedicine because, as you've seen from my colleagues, that really has become a game changer, and I think things have changed for the foreseeable future. So, what were the biggest barriers to your telemedicine strategy? Gonna ask the same things that we had. I think we faced all of those, but probably the strongest one, and others might disagree, but I think the strongest one was cultural, right? And I can picture many of my colleagues, whether clinicians or in administration, that had this reaction if anyone ever brought the concept of telemedicine. But if I walked around our institution and I talked to any of my clinician friends, I would say, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, but the Gartner hype cycle is this curve that starts with a new innovation, a technology trigger that gets sold to become a magic bullet until it reaches the peak of inflated expectations. And then there is this thread of disillusionment that dips before adoption begins through this slope of enlightenment, and then gets to the plateau of productivity when the technology is adopted and becomes the new normal. So others talk about this as a J curve for change, but that's the hype cycle, and I can think of specific physicians who fall when we talk telemedicine. They would tell me telemedicine. It's right here on the right. On the left bottom corner, while others thought, you know what, it's all hype. Don't talk to me about telemedicine down here, while others were ready to start adopting it. And yet others still were already using it in their day-to-day. But enter the stage our current foe, coronavirus. And as I said, I tell my team, never waste a crisis. I don't know about you, but I've been trying to push telemedicine for as long as I can think of. But in all seriousness, probably for the last 3 years, when we were the first entity that brought together Zoom and Epic together to deliver a common integrated solution that enabled a common platform that really made it easy to do the scheduling and the visit seamlessly, whether from a device or a smartphone, by putting these two applications together. And yet we had the hardest time getting adoption and getting critical mass. So coronavirus hits in the US in March 2020. And what you see here are visits, and these are medical specialties. This doesn't include developmental services or primary care. This is just the subspecialty visits. And on the 13th, as Chris and Larry have noted, is when the U.S. CDC put the advisory out there. It also happens to be when San Diego schools said that starting Monday, they were closing and that kids would be sent home. So that was a pretty sobering moment for our community. And what you'll see is that people went from this attitude of, I don't want to deal with telemedicine, it's not for me, to a week later when our volumes had plummeted. And you can see those volumes going from somewhere around 1,500 visits a day to a little over 400 visits a day, when suddenly people saw the light. And I don't want to be cynical, but I can't help myself. When people's livelihood gets threatened, people are willing to try new things. And suddenly people saw the light. And what we saw is that our digital strategy, which had been pretty diffuse, became very focused on one thing. And not that we didn't do some of the other things that Chris mentioned, as far as testing and as far as optimizing our EHR, et cetera. Of course, we did those, but the bulk of our efforts went to one thing. And that thing was telemedicine. And what we saw was that we started moving, and it doesn't matter where you want to start, right to left or left to right, but e-visits probably was the first thing that we moved to across all specialties. Also, professional physician-to-physician consultations. We continued to scale our remote monitoring. We figured out how to do rounds in our infectious disease unit to prevent or to minimize the amount of contact between providers and students with infectious patients, case conferences, you name it. In fact, you can see the volume, how almost overnight we went across all specialties from very little volume to quite a bit of it. So we're, unlike the numbers that Chris and Larry showed, we're nowhere near our regular volume. We haven't hit the 80% mark. This numbers here go through about a month ago, a little bit less than that. We've gone up a little. We're now hitting over 1,000 visits, but we're about kind of 2/3 of the way there. We're not quite where we want to be, but all that volume was telemedicine. In fact, at our height, as Chris noted, we're also somewhere around 70-75% of our volume being telemedicine. We're now closer to about 55-60%. So I'll ask this question of you all, because I had to do some reflection and look at the mirror. Who drove our digital strategy in March of 2020? Was it our board? No. Was it our CEO? No. Was it me? I love to say yes, but the reality is no. Was it somebody else? It's like, bingo. It was COVID. And I spent 3 years banging my head trying to get this thing moving forward, but it took this public enemy number one, COVID-19, to move the needle. Yes, all the legwork that we had done ahead of time enabled us to move quickly and to have telemedicine adopted. But one of the things that it's made me question is our effectiveness to drive cultural change. And so that's been quite sobering. I've always thought of myself as a change agent, and it's been an introspective journey to see how 3 years worth of effort with little progress to show got completely exponentially overtaken by this external force. But obviously the mantra of never waste a crisis prevails, and that's how we've moved forward. And the reality is that all those barriers that we had faced earlier have gone away, right? This was one area where telemedicine could have been our saving grace, and that's where we put resources to. The technology was there, and if it wasn't there, we figured it out. The cultural barriers just basically disappeared. The regulatory barriers were removed, at least for the short term. And so without barriers come to this point in time, May 2020, how are we doing on time? I think we're doing okay. I'm going to take a minute to walk
You're doing okay.
From San Diego, because as Chris noted, we've also taken to analytics quite a bit. These are numbers that are not Rady Children's numbers. These are for the County of San Diego. These are numbers from yesterday. But what you'll see is still for a number of weeks now, the projection that the county uses still says that April 19th was the peak for the county, and it doesn't anticipate that we'll hit another peak anytime in the foreseeable future. I know everybody's waiting for a second wave, but right now the numbers of the county don't anticipate that. We've had county-wise a little bit over 5,160 positive cases, 190 deaths, over 83,000 tests completed. And that gives you a breakdown of the tests. You see here the hospitalizations by broken down by age group and race. You see here the again more data on Deaths and hospitalizations, and by age group. You see some geospatial data in terms of density and cases, and what you'll see is that the areas here closer to the border are seeing more cases, and that probably has to do both in terms of just cultural norms and maybe people being more effusive and having more physical contact, as well as some cross-border activity, and that comes here. You see that just south of us in Tijuana, their numbers are pretty high, and you see it there as well. And this is the data for the 3-county area that we serve. So this gives you a picture of what we look like as a county and where we find ourselves come May of 2020. So what's our strategy now? I think we're getting back to seeing the larger picture, and we obviously have done a lot of work to optimize the EHR and continue to as we look at the new normal of how we're going to interact with our patients, at least for the foreseeable future, et cetera. Lots of optimizations on the EHR. We have moved telemedicine from a scale to an optimized bracket, right? It's scale is there, it's not going back, but we know we have still opportunities to optimize it, and we'll continue to do that. We are now coming up for air and picking up some of our other scaling efforts, in particular sensors and patient-generated content are coming up. We're not quite ready to start pilots across all these areas here, but certainly we have some pilots going with robotic process automation, AI, and we are looking to start on predictive analytics and some chatbots. So news at 11 there. So our volume has gone up. You see it broken down here. The blue is primary care. The candy stripes are the developmental services, audiology, speech therapy, those types of things, occupational therapy, and the red is pediatric subspecialty visits. More data, but here's some data that shows all of last year we did 525 visits of telemedicine. This year so far, over 26,000.
Wow.
So that is telling. We went in December from an average of 4 telemedicine visits per day to about 800 visits a day. That's a 200-fold increase in telemedicine visits. So what will be the new normal? The truth, I don't know, but I know one thing: we're never going back to the way it was. And again, this was 2019, 525 telemedicine visits. This also shows our photo accounts for dermatology, etc. And Vigo is a little robot that we use. That was then. This is now 24,000 photo counts. We haven't quite hit the number from all of last year, but we're a quarter of the way in. But instead, our robot has been only used 3 times. By the way, we have a total of one COVID positive patient in-house. It's one of those things where luckily pediatrics hasn't been hit as heavy as other parts of the population, even though there's evidence now that some kids with a genetic predisposition have a pretty severe reaction to the virus. Luckily, the numbers are low. I want to finish taking you back to last century, 1931 to be exact, and you will recognize some folks here. I'm pretty sure that you'll recognize this guy who happens to share a first name with me. I don't know if you'll recognize the others. How about this guy? Does he ring a bell? He's a fellow German. And maybe if you see him a little bit bigger, he might look a little bit more familiar. I'll give you a hint. It's the father of quantum physics. Well, he's Max Planck, 1918 Nobel Prize in Physics. And he said this: a new scientific truth does not win adoption by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but because its opponents eventually die and a new generation comes up that is familiar with it. Right. My friend Chris talked about the digital natives when it came down to testing and contact tracing. I think that applies also to telemedicine and frankly, all things digital health. It is here to stay. We're not going back. So I'm going to finish by saying welcome to the 21st century. Vielen Dank. Thank you.